Hi there, and welcome back. So, we're jumping into our original prop now, and before we go into Maya, there's just a few things that I want to talk to you about for actually creating your designs for this. Now, I've just used Photoshop for my designs. It's not particularly a detailed amount that I've used it fundamentally. I've only really used my brush tool and just held shift to create some straight lines, which I'll demonstrate in just a moment. But there is some considerations that I have made when I've actually created this visual asset. For this image plane. And this is namely that one, they're exactly the same height on the image that I've drawn. It's important that we maintain scale on this, just for when it comes to exporting and bringing into Maya, which will become a bit more self-evident as we go through. As well as this, you'll notice that these two images are overlapping, and I've drawn them separately initially, but getting ready for my export, I've obviously had them as two different layers, but this is so that when I go to export, I can hide one layer and I can also hide the background. And the reason that I'm hiding the background is so that I can maintain an alpha channel within it. It's basically going to make everything behind it transparent, or at least we can adjust that transparency quite nicely, and it will just give us this outline when we're working with that image plane. But when I have gone to export it, I've just selected, well, I've not even selected anything. I've just made sure that the only thing visible is what I want to export. File, export, quick PNG, and it's as simple as that. And if we go to my folder just here, we can see these two are just present in this folder. In terms of actually approaching this and creating it, it's a very straightforward process. I won't go into an awful lot of detail for this bit. It's not a Photoshop tutorial at the end of the day, but all I've used is my brush tool. I've enabled my symmetry just up here so I can go vertical. It generally comes in quite stationary, and then for the most part I've just held my shift key when using it. I've brought in this symmetry tool. I just need to click the tick up here, and currently I'm not working on any layer. A sort of cardinal sin for working in Photoshop in a lot of circumstances, working directly onto the background layer. We don't really want to do that, so just create a new layer over here. We should be naming them. I've not in this instance. But working on that layer, I've just gone to my brush tool over here, I've held shift, and I've drawn out an outline using this, for example. And ultimately all that shift is going to allow us to do is draw perfectly vertical or horizontal lines. But what it also allows us to do when we're drawing, I'll just draw out a handle and zoom in, is I can basically just draw points. So I can go around, I can start drawing the hilt, for example, just holding shift and clicking in various areas. I'm not looking for an awful lot of detail in this. Like I said, we're probably going to change this as the model progresses. In terms of the controls for Photoshop, it's really, again, quite straightforward. It's not too dissimilar from Autodesk Maya. Obviously your scroll wheel is just going to allow you to go up and down on your scene. We can hold Alt and scroll to go in and out, to zoom in and zoom out again. I can hold Control and scroll, and that's going to allow me to pan left and right. Although generally when moving about a scene, I will hold space, and just with that, we can just hold space and click and drag this through. And again, all I've done in creating this, I've just used my brush tool, and if I've made a mistake, I'll go to my eraser tool, which we can access by pressing E, that's E for echo, or just finding it just down here on the side. And with that, have some fun. Try not to get too hung up on how long you're using Photoshop. We're only making a quick design with this, but if you're quite capable with it already, now's a really good opportunity to show some skills. But also remember, we're just making a basic orthographic that we can work through to develop our asset further. Think back to your references that you've researched prior, or that you might be researching right now, and then just get stuck in. With that, we're gonna get started on our Maya document, on our Maya file. Sorry, so I'm just gonna head over to Maya 26, and even though I'm still working in my Fantasy Chess folder, I'm actually gonna create a new project. So I'm just gonna go to File and New, and I've still got my renderer up from previously, so I'll just click the cross on that. But I'm gonna, before I do anything, I'm just gonna go to File, Set Project, and it's taking me to my Maya projects file. I'm gonna create a new folder. I'm just going to call this Fantasy Sword. Obviously, you will call yours whatever is appropriate if you're not creating this sword. I've messed up the spelling there. Just let me rename it. And I'll just click Set on this. And again, just like when we did it with our chest, it's going to ask me to create that default workspace. So I'll just go through there. I'm going to also go to my project window and just click accept on here. Again, we can go through and name these, but we don't necessarily need to. And that's my folder set up. Just like previously when we've worked in this, I'm going to now set up my image planes and my layers to work with. So I'm just going to set my tab to my channel box editor. And I'm just going to begin by changing to my side view. And going to view, image plane, import image. I've not got my source images in there, so I'm just going to spend a quick moment popping those in. So I've just moved these from a folder I was using earlier and put them in my Fantasy Sword source images folder. So we've got our images just in here. So I'll go to that sword side image that I've got in my side viewport. I'll click open and we'll bring that in. And we'll just go to our front viewport and we'll do the same thing. Image plane, import image, sword front. So you might want to just jump in and start modeling this straight away. However, I'm going to do an extra step this time, and this is going to be to ensure scale in our object. Every single one of these grid squares that we've got on Autodesk Maya relates directly to a centimeter in real life, and Unreal's native size is in centimeters. So we can very nicely make this to scale without having to do that trick that we did when we imported our chest in, which was, increase that uniform scale by 10. And this is just going to involve me creating this image plane, moving it to the appropriate spot, and scaling it up to meet the points. So what I'm actually going to do before that is I'm going to give myself a reference. Now, I've designed this as a longsword. The average longsword is between 80 to 110 centimeters. So what I'm going to do, I'm just going to bring in a cube, go to my channel box editor, and we're going to give it a height of, let's say 100, and let's go with 100. That's nice and central. And I'm just going to give it a height of 100. I'll pull this up. It doesn't need to be perfect. Nothing ever is. But I'm just moving this up so that the base of it is fairly close to the grid. It doesn't need to be, perfect, for example. But now going to my image planes, I'm just going to move my gimbal to the bottom, and I've done that by pressing D. That's D for delta, and just dragged it somewhere close. And this means that when I scale it, it's going to scale out of this bottom bit here rather than in the center. It's just going to make our life a little bit easier. And I'll move that up now, so the bottom of our sword is, at the base of our grid. And all I'm going to do is I'm actually just going to scale these so that the sword is roughly the same height of that cube that we've made. We're just using this cube as a reference. Now that I've scaled that, I'm just going to get rid of it. We don't need it anymore. I've just pressed delete on it. And here we are. This is set up. This is going to make your grid look awfully small. That's not an issue at all. I'm just going to grab my front image plane and I'll drag it back so it's a little bit out of the way, and I'll do the same for my side image plane, again just so it's out of the way, and I'll just name these appropriately in my outliner. So just call this sword side, and this one sword front. And we're just going to put these into their new layer on our channel box editor, just by clicking that plane with a little circle next to it. We'll name this appropriately. So sword ref. Oh, I always forget you need an underscore. Click save, and I'll just hit the reference button so I can't interact with these anymore. And we're ready now to just jump in and start modeling. And I'm going to make these as separate components. I'm going to make my pommel, I'm going to make my handle, I'm going to make my hilt, and I'm going to make my blade all as separate components and group them together ready for engine later on down the line. So with that, let's make a start. So I'm just going to go into my front viewport, and I'm actually going to start out with the handle and the pommel for this session. I'm going to create a cylinder, so I'll just go to poly modeling and bring in a cylinder. And I'm just going to drag this up to somewhere central on my handle. We can see it's already kind of set up quite nicely in terms of its actual radii. I am going to increase that a touch, but we do need to adjust that height. So I'm just going to go to inputs in my channel box editor. I'm going to set that radii to 1.2. That's a bit better. And that height, I'm just going to drag on the value until we're somewhere close. There we go. And I'm quite happy keeping the subdivisions axis as it stands right now. But the subdivision's height, I'm just going to turn this to 3 initially, because I want these as sort of a buffer for what we're about to do. So I'm just going to select these 2 edge loops. Just selecting them, double clicking them. I'll go to my scale tool and I'm just going to bring these up towards the top. And you'll notice on my design that I've actually got these sort of spirals going down, and I want to build these as a piece of geometry. And this is going to utilize something that we call deformers, which are a really strong modeling tool to help us build something, to help us do some really cool stuff with a piece of geometry. So to do this, I'm obviously setting up right now. I've got these edge loops in just here. I'm actually just going to bevel these ever so slightly, and this is to give us another little buffer from this. So I'll go to Edit Mesh and Bevel. I'm only going to set the fraction of this to 0.1, but this, again, it's just a buffer. As well as this, what I'm now going to do is I'm just going to select all the subdivisions around, or all the faces on the side. I can just drag select from my side view, and we're going to do a extrusion on this. So just pressing Control E or going to our modeling toolkit, I'm going to set the thickness to, let's say, 0.5. 0.5 is a little bit too fierce. Let's go 0.1. There we go. And I'm going to turn off keep faces together on, and you can see we've got these partings now. It's making them split off. I'm now going to adjust the offset on this, and we'll start out nice and conservative. We'll start out with 0.1, and that's not too bad. It's still a little bit sharp for what I want, so I'm going to set this now to 0.05, and that's a bit better. And I'll just bring down that thickness to 0.05 as well. So that's my final values that I'm going with. And you might be wondering what I'm doing here. I'm setting up the sort of pattern that I want for the handle itself. So I'm just going to go back to my front view now. And for our next step, I want these vertices on our little insets to be level with these vertices. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to select these. I'm going to select these vertices here. I'm going to hold V, that's V for vector, and I'm just going to drag them down so they're level. And I'll do the same at the top. There we go. And now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go to my connect tool, because I want to build some geometry for us to work from. So I'm just going to click one of these edges with my connect tool. There we go. And currently it's set to 1 segment. I'm going to set this to 8. We'll go a little bit higher. We'll go to, let's go to 10. There we go. And I'll just hit enter now to finalize that. And what I've done here is I've created this these basic strips going down, but these edge loops that I've got here we've made as supporting geometry, and this is going to allow us to actually twist the object, because if we don't have this, it's just going to look really sharp and it's going to be really, really thin in the middle. So with that, I'm now going to just select my model. Well, I'm going to select my model and go to Deform, and we're going to find Nonlinear, and we're just going to use Twist, and it's going to give us these little values now. And if I go to my attribute editor, I've got these little values here of start angle and end angle. Low band and high bound just adjust where these little rings are. But if I adjust my start angle, we can see that this is now starting to twist. And this is all that that's all this deformer will do. It will twist what we've got. However, if I was to do this deformer without these edge loops going around, it would just create straight lines from start to finish, which would mean that these edges would start to intersect. So I'm just going to twist it a little bit. We don't want to go too far, but it's giving us this little wraparound look to our asset that is going to look really, really nice when we apply like a leather texture to it. And with that, I'm quite happy with that point's placement. To get rid of this deformer now, I just need to go to Edit, Delete by Type, and History, and it's no longer there. You might want to keep it there, but I wouldn't really recommend it. So with that in mind, we can now move on. We want to start creating our pommel and some little barriers that go through, and I have actually made a mistake with my low bound and high bound, so I'm just going to go back and reset, because when I've done this, if I go to my geometry, I've got these slants now at the top, which I don't actually want in hindsight. So instead, I'm just going to go back a little bit, just by pressing Control Z, and I'm going to adjust that high bound and low bound, and so it comes into, so it kind of levels out with these vertices at the top, and it just means that anything below or above the respective bounds won't be affected by this twist modifier. So just bring that down there, and we'll just do that twist now. There we go. And again, I'm not going too far, but we can see because of the way that I've done this now, it's keeping these edges above it straight. And that's what I'm looking for with this, because otherwise if they're at an angle, it's going to make some of the details I want to do later on down the line just look a bit wrong. So we've got those in position now. I'll just delete my history on the object. And now I'm going to go through and start making the bit where the handle actually meets the hilt. I've not got it in my design, but I like a sort of border. So I'm going to select this edge loop going around here, and I'm going to press Control E and extrude these out. We'll not go too far, but I want a sort of recessed bevel coming into this. And to do that, I could, you know, create an edge loop using my multi-cut tool, double click that and do a bevel on it, and then extrude this in. And that's perfectly valid if you would want to go that method, but I'm going to cheat a little bit for this. I've still got these faces selected, so what I could always do, I could just do another extrude and then adjust the offset a little bit, and we've already got that geometry there. A big part of what makes 3D modeling look easy for some people or look fast for others is just having a knowledge of the practices and how the tools function within the software. So I've already got these faces that I'm working with. I've done this extrusion again just to give me these edge loops of geometry around here, and because I want it to recess and kind of bevel inwards, I'm just going to extrude it again, and I'll put a minus 0.1 bevel on this, and we can see very quickly I've given myself this little recessed bevel going through. So if I just go to the front, I quite like how wide it is, but I don't like how squat it is. So I'm just going to go to the vertices and I'll drag it down. There we go. And this bit is going to intersect with our actual object. But it's just about giving us these nice little details that we might otherwise miss. So what I might actually do as well to really hammer this home is I'm just going to select these faces going all the way around, and I'll do another bevel on it, and we're just going to offset this. This time I'm going to add divisions to it. I'm just going to add one division, and I'll go to my scale tool. I'm going to press B, that is B for Bravo, and that's going to turn on our soft select. I'm going to hold B and drag my left mouse button, and I'm going to do this to adjust the strength of my soft select just until these edges in the corner go black. This means they're no longer going to be affected. I can now just scale these in and give it this nice bit of curvature just there, and make it look not necessarily machined, but you know, like a nice metal. Moving on to our pommel, I'm actually going to make this as a separate object from what I've already done so far. We might add it to, we might combine it together and bridge it together. However, the reason I'm making it a separate object is because there's a particular style that I want to go for on it. So with that, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to bring in a sphere. Usually we wouldn't work with spheres because of the triangles on their poles. However, in this instance I'm going to, because the subdivisions will line up with our actual handles top grid. So we can see we've got 20 subdivisions all the way around, and we'll have 20 subdivisions on our default sphere. So it's going to make bridging these together a lot easier. So with that sphere brought in, I'll just line it up somewhat. I'm going to go to my polysphere attribute, or I could go to my channel box attribute. The decision is yours. But I'm just going to increase that radius a little bit so it's somewhere thereabouts. There we go. And again, don't worry if the sizing looks a little bit off compared to your design. This will change. For instance, I've gone a little bit tall there, and when I'm actually building it, I'm finding it, you know, the pommel looks too big in comparison to everything else. So I've just set my radius to 2 on that, and it's actually come out to meet perfectly with that, which is really, really nice. I'm just going to press Control 1, and I'm going to select the edge loops, the face loop down here, and I'll hit delete, and then I can just double click these faces here. And I'm going to now get rid of the faces at the top of this object. So I'm just going to go to my object mode, isolate it by pressing Control 1. I select these faces on the top, press delete, and we're just going to combine these together now. So I'm going to select one, select the other, and we'll hit combine. There we go. And I'm just going to bridge this gap now because we know they've got the same amount of subdivisions. We can just bridge them. So edit mesh and bridge. There we go. You'll notice that if I click off this now, where we've done that bridge, we've actually got a bunch of sharp edges going through. And this is because Maya's unsure of how to shade it appropriately since we've bridged and created new polygons. So to fix that, I'm just going to select all the affected edges. So I've just selected one, double clicked one adjacent to go all the way around, and I'll double click this edge. And I'm just going to go to Mesh Display and hit Soften Edge. And now it's just got this nice smooth contour, which is what we want out of the object. And I've still got all this geometry that we can work with. So I'm actually going to make one of those recessed bevels, just not quite as strong at the top here. So the exact same process that we did previously. I'm going to press Control E to extrude it out. I'm actually going to offset this a touch. Let's set this to 0.1. 0.05. There we go. And actually the thickness is a bit too great there, so I'm going to set this to we'll set this to 0.25. There we go. That's a bit better. And I'll press Control E again, offset it just to give myself that little point, and I'll set this to 0.05 again. Control E to extrude. Negative 0.05. And we'll go negative 0.1 on that. I'm just going to offset it by 0.05 on that just to give us this little incline. And it's just giving us this nice rounded detail that we can work to. Now with that, if I wanted to do any adjustments to this, I still can. If I go to my front viewport and I'm still not quite necessarily happy with say my face, well sorry, my sphere, I can just, you know, select the faces involved with it and scale. The only issue that we'll have is we might start intersecting with the geometry here, but you know, I might want to say make this go up in such a fashion. Although the pommel is looking a bit big, we can still go through and just adjust these points. Another thing we might bear in mind is this is a little bit shallow compared to others. I might select the vertices just here and drag those down a little bit. And again, I've kept those faces around here just as a buffer between this piece and this piece to make my life a little bit easier when it comes to things like UV unwrapping or just generally working with it. And with that, I'm just going to select all the vertices on the top here. I'm just going to drag this up a touch just so it's a little bit more central. And you'll notice throughout this tutorial I'm constantly going back to my 3D viewport and rotating, and this is because I just want to see how it is looking fundamentally. I want to make sure that it looks okay. But that is our handle attached to our pommel quite nicely. I'm now going to just do some details on our pommel for this. Whilst for my design I have generally just gone with a sphere in here just to indicate a pommel, I'm just going to, you know, improvise a little bit here and think about it. I want this to be visually stimulating. I want it to look good. I want it to have a lot of creases and crevices that are going to capture light when we took it into Engine or render it. But I still want it to match what we're building so far. So the way that we're going to continue with this pommel is I'm just going to kind of segment it. I'm still going to keep with this recessed bevel kind of theme that I've got, make it look semi-machined, semi-not machined. But as well as that, I'm just going to add a few embellishments here and there to it. And I'm actually going to start from the top rather than the center or the bottom, as I've got an idea for what I want to happen on this top point. So I'm going to select this face loop just around here and the top faces, and I'm just going to extrude these out. So Control E, and I'll just bring these up a little bit. And as well as that, now that I've got these in position, because there's an ever so slight contour on this, I can actually accentuate that. So I'll go to my scale tool and I'll just drag on the y-axis to scale it. I don't want the vertices at the top kind of coming to such a great point here, so I'll just drag those down a little bit. And you'll notice that we've got the cardinal sin of 3D modeling at the top of here, which is triangles. They're not really a cardinal sin. But I do want to fix this a little bit so that it's not quite, so that it's not triangles. So the way that I'm going to do that is I'm just going to go through and delete the vertices, well, the edges, sorry, coming towards our center, and I'm just going to make a little cross in the middle. This is because I still want it to point upwards, but at the end of the day, I want it to I still want it to point upwards, but I still want it quads. And actually, I'll select these ones. You'll notice that I've changed my camera to top. I'm keeping the ones that are pointed in the correct, well, in line with our grid, and that just makes it easier for using tools as a general practice. I'll just hit delete on these, and I'm just going to spend a bit of time kind of retopologizing this. With this kind of cross made, I'm actually just going to go to my vertex mode, and I'm going to hit just select this vertex, and we're just going to chamfer this. Well, I say chamfer, we're going to bevel this, and it will create what's called a chamfer. So I'm going to go to edit mesh and bevel, and basically all it's done is it's expanded the vertices out into all its connecting edges. So in this case, it's given us just a perfect quad. I can now just go in with my multi-cut tool and start drawing these edges into place, and it's going to convert all of this into quads. Like so. Now there is another consideration that I'm making here, because I will make a high poly version of this. I'm actually just going to press 3, and it's going to give me my smooth preview for this, and we've still got some shading artifacts that I don't necessarily like. However, we're just going to do some changes to this, so I'm just going to focus my camera on this very quickly. I'm going to put in some in a control loop just here, and what I'm going to do is I'm just going to select all of these faces on the top, and I'll press Control E, and I'll just scale these in a little bit, like so. Drag them up a touch. And now I can just bring this dome up ever so slightly. And now if I press 3, we've got this kind of rise at the top, but it's still maintained quads, so we know it's going to subdivide appropriately. Moving on to the rest of this piece, again, I want to think about embellishments, what I can add to this. So I'm just going to select this face loop going all the way around, so pressing Control E now to extrude it. I'll give it a thickness of 0.1. I'm going to give it an offset of 0.05. Actually, we'll go to 0.1 for that as well. And what I'm actually going to do is I'm just going to select this face loop, and I'll drag it down a touch. I'll grab these edges here and just scale them in. I'll just zoom out, give it a look. That's how I'm wanting it. And again, just thinking about embellishments that I can apply to this piece. And I'm just going to check it in my smooth display mode as well, just by pressing 3. And it's coming along quite nicely now. So with that, I'm just going to add some final embellishments, and I want some sort of inset places within that. So the way that I'm going to do that, I'm just going to select the faces in the middle. I'm actually just going to go 4 by 6 in this instance. And I'm going to do this for all the sides. So just hold tab to drag. There we go. And I'm aligning my camera just to be sure that I'm selecting the wrong points. As I've said previously, when you're doing any sort of big changes to an object, you really want to make sure that you've only selected the faces that you want to work with. So for instance there, I've accidentally selected the face, sorry. I don't want to have that, just in case it ends up, you know, interacting and impacting what I'm about to do. So with these faces selected, I'll just press Control E, and I'm just going to change their thickness to -0.1. I'm actually going to go to -0.5 to bring, no, that's a bit too much, -0.25, sorry. There we go, just to bring those in a little bit. I'm then just going to do some subdivisions with this, so I'm going to grab these faces in the middle for these, and I'll do this for all of them. And again, I've just accidentally selected some faces, so I'm just deselecting them as I go through. We're just going to do a check and make sure I've not selected anything I don't want to. And I'll just do an extrusion on this, Control E. We'll go to 0.5. No, it's too much. 0.0. Oh, we'll just go to 0.1 actually. And we'll give it an offset of 0.1 as well, just to bring it in, to give us this kind of embellished look on the pommel. And I'm just going to check how it looks in my smooth display. I want to do some adjustments to this, but I'm going to leave the high poly for later. I'm checking it with this smooth display though, just to make sure that it is smoothing over decently. But with that, that's my pommel low poly sort of, that's my pommel and handle, sorry, low poly sort of done with this. But you'll notice through this we've utilised those new tools like Deformer, like just experimenting with Extrude a little bit more and showing some different techniques for it. So as you move through this, obviously if there are any concerns, call myself or another member of staff over to assist you with this. But have some fun with what you're building, whether you're following this tutorial step by step or you're just using it as a guide for what you kind of tools and practices you can use, that's perfectly fine. But please reach out for support if you need anything. As a final step before I do close this down, all I'm going to do is just name this to handle, if I can spell handle correctly. And I'm just going to delete the history alongside it, just to get rid of those groups. I'm just going to save it now, and we're just going to go to File, Save Scene As. I'm in my scenes, and we're just going to call this Sword Pommel. And there we are, that's the first step we've taken towards creating this sword. With that, I'll leave you to it, but as mentioned, if there are any concerns, please reach out to myself or another member of staff and have fun with this model.